be on the gravel path. I'll meet you there shortly.
Okay.
Hello there, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi folks, just follow this track up. You're just going to keep going straight past the blacksmith forges to a clearing with a wooden shelter, and I'll meet you there.
Okay.
Once we-
Thanks a lot.
अनि के दुई थरी टुर हुन्छ र कि
अनि
सबै
guided
guided
tour
tour
हो?
हुने हैन
राइट कि लेफ्ट अब गाइज त्यसले के भन्ने थियो राइट कि लेफ्ट
उयो चाहिँ बसे भइहाल्यो नि कसरी नै बाटो आउँछ
यहीँ बस भन्यो होला त्यसले अनि राइट कि लेफ्ट जान्थ्यो एउटा डिरेक्सन मात्र रहेछ यहीँ बस भन्यो होला त्यसले तर यो सेल्टर जस्तो कुन एङ्गलबाट छ र उनीहरूले के बुझ्छन् अनि तिनीहरू गयो भने हामी पनि जाने कहाँ छ मुन नुन हुनुहुन्छ समुद्रको त
When you're ready folks, just head this way.
लिज मानेको देखाइदिएन
खोलको मान्छे थ्याङ्क यू सरी फोक
बुढो जस्तै मुभीमा जिउने
को के भयो अरे
लाइन त अब
त्यस्तो हो नि त बिस्तारी हिँड्दै हिँडिरह नेपालमा
यो गयो त्यो ट्राफिक भनेर
क्यामेरा ल्याए भयो भिडियो खिच्न पाएन त फोटो मात्रै तिमीहरूले आफूले मैले खिचिहाल्यो नि त्यही भएर हो मलाई खासै इन्ट्रेस्ट नलागेको चाहिँ मैले यहाँ कुरो भनेर चाहिँ पनि
त्यसमा त हुँदै होइन नि स्याउ आयो
How are we today folks? Beautiful day for it, and how gorgeous was that Gordon River?
Fantastic.
Excellent. So we're ready for a history lesson now, nothing too complicated. Just a few things to keep in mind before we continue with the tour. We want to keep this place clean, we want to keep this place intact, and we want to ensure safety for everyone. Now, rubbish. We do have a bin back at the jetty, but highly recommended any rubbish you have, please take back on the boat with you. I've already donated 2 of my ashtrays, so any more smokers, just see the 2 gentlemen with the mint tins. You can use, if you don't mind sharing your ashtrays, thanks.
You said if you keep them.
But I think everyone's got the water bottles as well, which they did mention on the boat. And also, be aware of what's in your pockets as well. The worst offender is tissues. So do be aware that nothing falls out whilst we're out throughout the island. Another thing was to keep endure safety. We've got a lot of uneven surfaces, so please do remain on the paths as well. And even though it's still a little early in the season, we have spotted snakes on the island, so another thing to keep in mind. Don't worry, they normally do scatter when they see people arrive, but it's just a thing to look out for. most importantly, we've got a lot of exposed ruins on the island, and I ask if you treat this island a bit like a museum. Admire the ruins from afar on the path and don't go up to them and start touching them or sitting on them or walking on them. We want to keep this island, for many years to come, for people to come and visit those ruins, and they can crumble easily under pressure. But other than that, take loads of photos and enjoy yourself. Oh, by the way, just a quick introduction, my name is Tara, and of course I will be your guide for the next hour. Let's go back to the very beginning, where I'd like to take this time to acknowledge the island's native name, Langarera Rauna. For the Palauan people, this was an island used as a women's gathering island. Women from the western tribes, such as the Tugi and the Mimigan tribe, used to come over here and collect swan's eggs. Then James Kelly, he's the first European to arrive here in 1815. He names this island Sarah Island, after Sarah Birch, who named after Sarah Birch, the wife of Sir Thomas Birch, who funded James Kelly's expedition here. And then between 1822 to 1833, the European settlers came in. They set this island up as a convict punishment settlement for the secondary offenders. These were the convicts who were already transported to Australia, and if they reoffended, this is where they got sent to be banished. The first of the banishment settlements predating Port Arthur by a decade, and by reputation known to be the worst. However, if we survive for all that blood, brutality, a little bit of cannibalism and general nastiness, you also survive to see a number of puzzles. 7 puzzles I will be presenting, with the first puzzle relating to the island's shipbuilding industry, and we will be checking out the shipyards at the end of the tour. The intention with Sarah Island was to set it up as a slave labour camp to get the valuable Huon pine from down the river out to Hobart Town. But they couldn't move it out fast enough because of weather conditions, and Hell's Gate, of course, being the only way in and out. Strawn has yet to be set up. So it became more convenient to build a ship from the stockpile and then sail it out. How they were building these really good ships using only convict slave labour, well, that there is our first puzzle. Now where we're gathered yes, hello. You see a lot of birds throughout. So where we're gathered, quite appropriate, as this is the muster yard, and this is where the men were gathered morning and night for their roll call. It's estimated about 1,200 convicts passed through the settlement within the 12 years, run by the man who is known as the Commandant. From this raised area, he had a small office where he could supervise the work of the day in the shipyards, the blacksmith forges, and beyond in the clearing, the stone quarry, and below the quarry, the base of a millstone to grind wheat into flour. And those 2 workstations, the quarry and the mill, were reserved for the chain gangs. The men out on Grummet Rock, they were not trusted to go out in the workboats with the work parties. Ironically, with those men being able to cross over, they were the ones escaping the most. And these stones here, they formed a large pulpit for the Commandant to stand on to address the convicts and to issue the disciplines and the punishments. So if you've got a morbid curiosity as to where the punishments took place, there it is. Now who's first? No, really? Okay, moving on then. Well, the first Commandant, he loved any old excuse for a punishment. That was Lieutenant Cuthbertson, known to be a sadistic bully who drowns off the island accidentally. Yes, accidentally, come on. Oh, if I could just ask for folks to come a bit more forward, anyone who's wandering through, that they can get through easy. Thanks. See, what happened with the Commandant is he's out in his boat to rescue a ship that slipped its moorings during a storm. However, his boat's overturned, he's flung into the water. He waves to the men on shore for help, and the men just stand there and wave back at him. Well, our next stop is out in the open towards the boat docks, and there's a few things to spot along the way. What we're standing on and have just walked through is the reclaimed land that was built by the convicts out of Quarry Rock to construct the shipyards. The raised area is actually where the original island starts. So as we're walking up, keep an eye out beyond the stairwell at the base of the tree ferns, a 3-foot-high sandstone retaining wall that was built to excavate the area below. And with the low tides today, keep an eye out if you spot any blue gum logs poking beneath the water's surface. I'm going to tell you what they were used for. Let's go!
अल्छी गर्ने नै त्यो हुन्छ नि घन्टालाई पानी सरप we can say एक घन्टामा त फर्केर पुग्छ हैन टोटल पानी खस्यो
It was right behind us.
किन लाउँछ नि कस्तो गर्मी छ खेल्नु पानीमा अन्सालाई देऊ न अन्सार नपुगेर कसले बोक्छ उसको बुढोको सानो मेरो ज्याकेट खसेर हरायो भने need to buy me new one.
Oh, buy me new one. You buy me new one.
यो बारहरू त बनायो नि रिसेन्टली बहुत रहेछ के खेल्थ्यो नि त्यसले घोचेमा प्लान्ट
If you did spot those logs out there, and it's okay if you did miss them, we might spot them again back at the shipyards. So starting from the jetty where you got off the boat, and within a 700-metre stretch on this side of the island, docks, roads, wharves and jetties were constructed by the convicts using large, heavy blue gum logs they set in marine pigsty fashion. They create this box-like structure running along the shore with multiple layers, similar to that of a pig pen, with a wooden platform on top and a loading with rock and gravel to create a good working surface. Being hollow underneath, over time they have collapsed. And of course, during the low tide, you can often spot the base timbers still in place. Over 150 blue gum timbers weighing 50 to 60 tonnes each. But what we can still see at its original height today is this land strip ahead here, the promontory, completely filled with rock and rubble to house the commissariat store. And this is where they kept all the supplies, including the supplies you're not allowed to have. Rum, tea, sugar, tobacco, otherwise known as the contraband. Or you're deprived of all comforts of any kind here. This beachfront behind me was once a deep boat dock that secured the workboats from the northwest gales and kept under guard to prevent convicts from trying to escape. Because indeed the most effective means of escape from here was by boat. 180 escape attempts over the years, starting as early as the first month of the settlement. Not many were successful, but there were a few. And you may be familiar with the story of the first successful escape, where a group of 8 men left from a party at Kelly's Basin, taking with them only an axe. Now you saw at Heritage Landing how thick that bushland is. Pretty easy to get lost, and they also did start to get pretty hungry too, and they opted for cannibalism as their last means to survive. 3 of them, they nope out very fast and start to head back towards the settlement. 1 of them sadly dies on the way back, and the other 2 die when they arrive back in hospital. The other 5, they're getting taken out one by one until it's left to 2. Robert Greenhill, the axe bearer, and Alexander Pearce. Pearce knows that he's going to be next, and he waits for Greenhill to make the grave mistake of falling asleep first, and Pearce is the last one standing. There was also, in 1828, James Goodwin, in a makeshift canoe, went down the river and got through that overland. Within 6 weeks, he makes it to the outskirts of Hobart, where he's then recaptured, but not sent back here. He kept a journal with him with such detailed entries of where he had been. They employed Goodwin at the Surveyor General's office to map out the Central Highlands. Goodwin's route and up the coast became the 2 common escape routes for the convicts, but they did notice later, by 1829, escape attempts were starting to cease almost entirely. And that there is our second puzzle. Now you're probably wondering how many people were on this island at a single time. Well, the top muster recorded in 1828 was 531 people here. 380 of them were convicts and 95 of them were military guards. And if you were assigned to come here as a military guard, you were not allowed to turn it down. So you did have the option to bring your family with you. The guards with their wives and their children were all housed within the military barracks, kept separate from the convicts housed in that direction. But we're now going in this direction to Government House to talk about some other civilians that lived here.
Santino community Santino community military family अनि
अन्त्य त
त्यो भागेकोलाई कस्तो राम्रो पोस्ट
त्यसले
सक्सेसफुल हो नि त त्यो
सक्सेसफुल भएर होइन त्यसले नयाँ नयाँ ठाउँ गएर कहाँ 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 बसेर म्याप बनाउनको लागि
6 वेकोले धेरै ठुलो काम गरेर
बाटो थाहा भयो नि त उसलाई
गभर्मेन्टलाई भनिदियो नि त त्यसले गभर्मेन्टले म्याप बनाएको
युज गर्यो भाग्न सक्नु नै ठुलो कुरा हो नि
छोप्न छोप्यो नि त्यसलाई जेल पनि हाल्यो तर यहाँ पठाएन यहाँ चाहिँ एकदमै गाह्रो यो सबैभन्दा प्युर ठाउँ हो अरे यहाँ चाहिँ कस्तो खालको कन्भिक्टहरू आउँछ भन्दाखेरि कस्तो काम गऱ्यो फेरि त्यही माथि बदलाइन भयो भने डबल सेकेन्ड डिग्री कन्भिक्सहरू यहाँ चाहिँ यहाँ यसो दिन्छ अनि त्यो चाहिँ एक्सट्रिम पनिसमेन्ट दिन्छ यसलाई चाहिँ
compared to other settlements. Well, Sarah Island was just an experimental island and most of their buildings consisted of timber cottages. They didn't know that it was going to be the attraction that it is today, so by the time that they abandoned this place, it was take what you need and left the rest to fall and rot away over time. So today we mainly see their brick fireplace remains. Well, behind me being the remainders of Government House that consisted of 4 two-room cottages next to each other, connected by a single veranda, facing the view of the harbour. Well, we met the first commandant and we got rid of him. In 1826, the second commandant arrived, James Butler. We'll get to him later on. 2 of the doctors here, they're slightly mad, and another Dr. Garrett is drunk the entire time he's here. Next door is our military officer, Major William Champ. And at the far end is the Reverend William Schofield and his wife Martha, who turn up later. They're Wesleyan Methodist missionaries and they run a school for the military's children. Behind their cottage, where we see the remainders of a fireplace and an oven, was a small cottage for their servant. And 2 other servant quarters and kitchens just through the scrubs, those 2 piles of bricks. Under the tree fern, we got the remainders of a hot water system. That was a firebox that had a big iron pot on top for simmering water all day. And at the back of the clearing, a 19th century conventional oven where Sarah Simmons, the cook, lived and worked. Sarah's presence here, it's quite a curious one, as we don't know the real reason as to why she's here. Many of the women here were wives of the military, but for the first year of the settlement, before it became the home of the hard men in chains. Out on Grommet Rock were 8 convict women running a hospital, because you don't send a workforce here without skilled nurses. Now, you do also need competent doctors, and at one stage the convicts have had enough of this drunken doctor and want to get rid of him. Now, how did they do that? Well, a few men, they went up to the gardener's cottage up the top of the island. Excuse me. They pay a visit to William Sylvester. They bribe him with a quid of tobacco if he runs down the garden path. Oh, excuse me. Don't worry, I did test negative. So just, I talk too much for this job. Whoa. Just, it's that lingering tickle, that's all it is. Yeah, just catch my kidney if it comes out. I have a lozenge. Would you like a lozenge? Oh, thank you. Oh, good champion. got more in your first aid than I do. Rightio. But yeah, they're like, hey, Will, do you fancy a quid of tobacco? But you got to do one small favour first, and that's if you run down the garden path towards the doctor's house completely stark naked. That's exactly what he did. He came running down, screaming and flailing like a maniac, and exposed himself to the doctor's young wife and her kid sister sunning themselves out the back. The doctor and his family gone within a week. Well. My God. Well, you could say this incident with Sylvester is part of a campaign to get rid of, well, to destabilise the authority within this settlement, which is quite easy to do, in fact. As the commandant, the doctor, and the military officer are under 3 different chains of commands, which gives the men a nice set of cracks in the bureaucratic system that the convicts are going to take full advantage of. But later.
उठ्नै सक्दैछ
डॉक्टर तो ड्रम बडा भन्नु सस्पेन्स खाली भन्दो रहेछ यसो गर्दा गर्दै सिद्धिहाल्छ दामी लाग्यो भनेको
Rightio, well this elaborate looking pit here was a lime pit that was used for storing lime slurry. Down the river is where they mined the limestone, fired and slaked it with water to create this yogurt-like slurry. And the most common use for the slurry, fertilising the vegetable gardens and mixing with sand to create mortar for brick constructions. And yes, the bricks they were made locally. 2 kilometres across the harbour is Brickmakers Bay, where they found the clay pits, set up a kiln and then shipped the bricks over by boat, along with their fresh water source, which they collected from creeks on that land strip ahead, as there is no fresh water here on the island. Looking out that way, just straight ahead, where on the water surface we catch a patch of a pale rocky cliff face. Back there is a small island known as Halliday's Island, where up to 80 men are buried in unmarked graves. One of them, John Ollery, who was sentenced to 50 lashes on April 27th, 1822, becoming unconscious by his 30th lash and pronounced dead by his 35th while still tied to the lashing post. They said he could have died earlier than that. And when he was laid to rest there, the convicts in his honour nicknamed the island Ollery's Holiday. We can only hope he's resting in paradise somewhere, old John Ollery, but I'm going to talk to you more about punishment with our next stop ahead. So I do just ask, come back onto the paths, there is a few uneven surfaces
अस्ति त्यो पोट आफूमा नि हुन्छ नि त
पोट आफू भन्दा यो अझै खतरनाक एकदमै हेरी कोठादरमा 1st डिग्री अफेन्डर छ
यहाँ चाहिँ सेकेन्डरी ल्याउनु
यसरी अफेन्ड गरेर जेलमा परिसकेको मान्छेले पनि जेल पर्दाबाट फेरि अफेन्ड गर्यो भने आउनु त्यसपछि यिनीहरू सुध्रिन यिनीहरू लात्तो के भुत्छ
Let's talk punishment, shall we? Welcome to the solitary confinement jail. As we enter down the corridor to the right, we enter to 6 solitary cells. Each cell was 6 feet in length, 6 feet in height, and 3 feet in width, with 1/2 metre thick brick walls and heavy timber doors, guaranteed to block out any light and sound. As punishment, these cells were to represent the size and look of your average grave for the convicts to contemplate their mortality in silence, isolation, and absolute darkness. We come to puzzle 3, which is they did not use it very often, on average 1 cell 2 days a week. Now, it is possible that it is an attempt to find an alternative punishment to the regime of the lash. Many of you may be familiar with the cat of 9 tails. Well, here on Sarah Island, they had the Macquarie Harbour cat. 3 cats of 9 tails woven together, and within the knots of the leather embedded pieces of lead, guaranteed to cut open your back within the first lash. After about 50 to 100 lashes, it's not going to be pleasant. You take in your time whilst you're on this island for that 1 hour. 1 hour is how long it took to perform 100 lashes. And the highest count of 10,000 lashes to 240 men in 1825. That is quite a very high number. Well, you see, at that time, the settlement was in a state of revolt, involving strikes in the work gangs, attacks on guards and on fellow prisoners, and a frenzy of escape attempts. In order to stop this rebellion, Governor Arthur stages the only execution that happens here, and that is because the hanging just becomes a joke amongst the men. The morning of, they're singing songs, cracking jokes, even sneaking a bit of rum in between. And just before William Allen, Thomas Hudson, and Francis Oates were dropped, those 3 men kick off their boots into the crowd, they're not going to need them where they're going, and yelled out, "Goodbye, Jack." Jack being the code for the devil, because for these 3 men, this was an escape from hell on earth. Now, who's up for the bakehouse? Just look out for some storm drains where you can see the white rocks, so let's head on over. Well, you can imagine all the kinds of elaborate smells that would have occurred within this area. Not only do we have our bread baking in our Suffolk parish oven, next door at the back of the clearing ran the tannery, used for tanning leather from kangaroo hides to make boots. And on this island in particular, the common ingredients used in that tanning process was human feces and urine. Next door to the bakehouse here. If we have a look at the mouth of the oven, we can see that the roof is set in a dome shape with bricks lined vertically. And no mortar is required to hold those vertical bricks, as it's all to do with how they design the oven. They create a flat level floor, they build the walls around, fill it up with sand to create that dome shape, and the bricks for the roof have their sides shaved and placed vertically onto the sand and then formed out into a spiral pattern. They dig out that sand dome, the bricks lock into place. Now, the idea is to create a circular heat vortex within the oven. So they set the roof on a slight tilt and an iron door at the front with 2 butterfly vents for sucking in the cold air and drawing out the hot. All the bakers have to do is place a wheelbarrow full of wood at the front of the oven off centre, burn it down to ash, shovel out the ash, and then can bake up to 400 loaves of bread just using that circulating heat. Now, before I continue on, how is everyone with the heat right now? Does anyone need shade? No, good. We can wrap up here for another 5 minutes. Rightio. Because now I'm going to talk about what was the diet like. Well, for the military and Major Champ, they can take their pick from the following. Their absolute favourite was Black Swan baked. They said to have consumed over 2 million black swan within this harbour within the 12 years.
Wow.
Not really good on resources, the military. There was also roast wombat and echidna stuffed with onion and sage, which was said to have had the texture of goose. What's better comes with its own toothpicks.
Yeah.
No, that was bad. For the rest of the men, however, salted beef or pork distinctly green and slimy by the time it arrived here, so emphasis on the beef or pork. The flour being a little bit better because they did grind the wheat here at the mill. The bread, however, contained a fungi called ergot. That was to make the bread go mouldy within days, so convicts could not take it as rations for escaping. And skilly, a mixture of flour, water, and a bit of salt. In other words, your clag paper mache paste. If the men were lucky, they received a potato from the vegetable gardens, but it's not a diet adequate to the work that these men are doing. So the men are certainly going to supplement their diet. Now, despite the men in the work parties were not allowed to go fishing and hunting, they were out there digging pits to catch kangaroo and wallaby, but they keep the fresh meat for themselves and bribe the military with the skins, which they then take to the tannery for their own profit. Oh yes, the military, they were in on it too, lining their pockets best they can, bringing in rum, tea, sugar and tobacco to trade with the convicts. Puzzle 4. How are the convicts paying for all this contraband? Well, it's partly by trade, where one example, Richard Pell, a boatman, was collecting sticks to carve into decorative walking canes, selling them off to the gentry in Hobart via Major Champ. And another convict also did a trading with a military officer with a vest he had made out of swan skin. This is also why we think Sarah Simmons, the cook, might be here. Sarah came all the way from the female factory, the women's prison in Hobart, where the women have detailed sketches of the houses they've worked in, arranging the break-ins, and some of the profits from those break-ins are coming here to help the men. You could say that Sarah's making sure the military aren't creaming too much at the top, especially when she's often spotted at the convict clerks' cottages. And that is where our next stop is, so look out for 2 more storm drains as we
Stay
head on
like
over
that.
to where the tree is.
पुलिसको दैलो छ
Should be on the side.
Well, the clearing just behind you, the bench, that was the location of what was a 2-room cottage that housed the commissariat officer Thomas Lompriere, along with his wife Charlotte and their 4 children. Lompriere was acting as bookkeeper and treasurer on the island with the help of 4 convict clerks, his supervisors in 4 single-room cottages. Those collapsed fireplaces indicating that the cottages were back-to-back, equipped with a bed, a desk and a chair. And these clerks, they kept meticulous records and noticed a sudden change within the punishments. Recording in 1828, 8,004 lashes issued to 198 men. However, in 1829, only 800 lashes to 30 men. That is a 90% drop in punishment within a single year. Puzzle number 5. Would you believe it happens overnight on March 31st, 1829? To get an idea of that date, we need to go all the way back to 1826, where 3 events occurred. The first being the arrival of the new Commandant James Butler, known to be a very firm but fair man. The second was shortly after his arrival, a southerly storm came in and washed away everything that they attempted to build on the edge of the island. All those docks and those jetties, gone. So Commandant Butler then instigates 3 years of forced labour to construct or reconstruct everything substantial within the whole settlement. And the third event was a sad one for the convicts, a hanging in Hobart. Not just any hanging, but the hanging of Matthew Brady, who escaped from here in 1824, making a promise to the rest of the men that he was going to return with an army to free them. And for 2 years, he becomes one of Van Diemen's Land's most notorious bushrangers. nicknamed the Gentleman Bushranger because he would never rob from a lady and because of the polite way he used to greet you as he robbed you. He was betrayed by one of his gang members, and that is when he's caught, arrested, tried in Hobart Town, and despite many petitions for it to not go ahead, Brady is hanged on May 5th, 1826. Upon hearing the news that their hero was not coming back for them, this causes an uproar within the men here and a rise of a resistance. But there may be hope for these men just yet, and that is with the new arrival of David Hoy, a master shipwright from Dundee, Scotland, who trained in Boston, Massachusetts, and quite a wealthy man in his own right. So what's a man of his status doing on an island like this? That's puzzle number 6. Puzzle number 7 is just further down the path.
Puzzle number 7.
त्यही भएर त गाइडेड टुरहरू कस्तो भयो गाइडेड भएपछि पनि ठिक हुन्छ क्या
सबै रमाइलो हुन्छ अनि
अघि नै त्यो हिस्टोरिकल साइटमा घुमाएर निस्किँदाखेरि 10 मिनट मिस गर्दा
हामी यसरी घुम्दै घुम्दै 10 मिनट जान्छ कोही सक्थ्यौँ
हरिछ भने
No one's trapped at the back. Can come a bit forward if you like. Northwesterly breeze isn't too much blowing at the moment. Rightio, well here we have the only sandstone building on Sarah Island, built under Butler's instruction between 1827 to 1829. A 3-storey high building with each wall representing the level of the first and the second storey. And to imagine the third storey, a 2-metre high chimney and a roof tiled with wooden shingles. The building, often called the courthouse, and may have been intended as such, but original documents refer to it as the penitentiary. It was only, however, used as a dormitory that housed 80 to 90 convicts, and those convicts telling us it was a comfortable place to sleep. Now, why were these convicts given such a comfortable place to sleep? Well, there we have our 7th and final puzzle. Well, now that I've presented you the 7 puzzles, I'm just going to restate them before we solve them. Sarah Island for 12 years operates as a convict penal settlement known to have the worst reputation. But halfway through those 12 years, we see the following changes happen. A shipyard building good ships. Escape attempts dropping to almost nothing. An elaborate jail scarcely used. A thriving trade in contraband. A 90% drop in punishment. A master shipwright David Hoy working here. And a comfortable place for the men to sleep. Well, I'm going to solve those puzzles for you. Back down at the wooden shelter, we're going to take the shortcut down the stairwell. Just, of course, take your time to watch your footing so you don't trip. Most importantly, as we walk by Maggie's group, if we could just respect them by keeping noise to a minimum, even if they're just at the oven. So once you've taken it all in, head on back when ready.
You asked about that bird already? It's called a green rosella.
Beautiful. Thank you for telling that.
We saw one at another
You
place.
might know everything about
No, we saw it just a minute ago.
did you?
And we told it was
हजुर